It's a much-anticipated visit. US Health Secretary Alex Azar is leading a delegation to Taiwan to learn from the island's success in fighting the coronavirus. The United States has recorded 5 million cases. Taiwan has fewer than 500. But analysts say the trip is not just about the pandemic.
It's definitely more the optics and the message being sent to the Taiwan government and the people of Taiwan, as well as to the government in China, as far as what level the U.S. wants the relationship with Taiwan to be. Obviously, the health secretary is not going to learn much during a 3-day visit.
China claims sovereignty over Taiwan, and the island is a main irritant in the troubled relationship between the world's two largest economies. Azar is due to meet Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen during his 3-day visit. That's angered China's leaders, who object to all official contact between Taiwan and the US. Chinese government ministers are warning the United States delegation to stick to the One China principle.
I want to stress that the One China principle is universally recognized by the international community. Any attempt to ignore, deny or challenge the One China principle will end up in failure.
The trip is expected to further fray ties between Beijing and Washington. Both are at loggerheads over trade, technology, human rights and territorial disputes, especially in the South China Sea.
It's possible that the mainland would look at the economic consequences, reminding Taiwan that if they don't want to play with the mainland, that there's going to be a very, very cold, harsh, hard world out there.
China's government says Taiwan is the most important and sensitive issue in Sino-US relations. This rare high-level visit comes as those relations have already sunk to their lowest point in decades. Sarah Clark, Al Jazeera.
Now, it's the highest level US delegation to visit Taiwan in 4 decades, at least since 1979, when Washington switched its diplomatic recognition of the Chinese government from Taipei to Beijing. Since becoming president, Donald Trump has used Taiwan to antagonize Beijing. Weeks before taking office, he rang Taiwan's president and questioned the long-standing US policy of One China. Trump later reaffirmed support for the policy and hosted China's Premier Xi Jinping at his Florida resort, and the two sides appeared close. But that changed in 2018 when Trump slapped tariffs on Chinese imports and launched a trade war. The US also accusing China of military aggression in the South China Sea. Last year, the US approved billions of dollars in weapons sales to Taiwan, fighter jets, tanks and anti-aircraft missiles. Well, journalist William Yang is vice president of the Taiwan Foreign Correspondents Club, and he joins us via Skype from Taipei. Good to have you with us. How upsetting is this visit for Beijing?
So Beijing has made it really clear last week that they don't approve this visit, and they also don't want any official contact between Taipei and Washington. So they have promised to launch an unspecified countermeasure for this trip, because the geopolitical implication of this trip has actually overshadowed the actual interaction between the health officials between Taipei and the U.S. And a lot of the analysts view this as more of a gesture from the U.S. side to show Beijing that the ongoing dispute between China and the U.S. is not going to calm down anytime soon. And this is likely going to trigger more hostile or responses from Beijing.
So what extent do the people of Taiwan welcome this kind of visit, or do they fear that it's going to bring punishing repercussions from Beijing?
So the Taiwanese people have been dealing with this kind of warnings and also consequences coming from Beijing over the last few decades. So, in fact, since Donald Trump came into power, the Taiwanese people have been very welcoming and also supporting the idea that the U.S. is willing to upgrade the interaction with Taiwan over the last few years. And so this move, which also has been highlighted as part of the consequences of the Taiwan Travel Act that was passed last year, has been really received positively over here. clear, and people have a lot of confidence that as long as the U.S. is willing to send more high-level officials and also engage in more dialogues and engagement with Taiwan, they're willing to take this risk, even if Beijing is going to launch any kind of countermeasures later on.
Do they not fear, though, that the U.S. is using Taiwan as a pawn in its fight with Beijing?
I think for the Taiwanese people, any kind of increased international support will be viewed positively over here, because people here knew very well that they can only count on these temporary or periodical support from bigger powers in order to secure more long-term negotiation assets or capitals for them later on, so that Taiwan's importance will not be ignored. So even if the U.S. is probably, yes, using Taiwan at this particular point to increase the dispute and the level of the tension between the Sino-U.S. relationships, but for the Taiwanese people, they view that as long as the U.S. is willing to engage Taiwan in its in a more positive way, then they're willing to take the risk, and also they are also not afraid really about the verbal warnings coming from Beijing unless a very, very serious and very concrete measure was being announced and also launched by Beijing.
William Yang in Taipei, thank you.
Thank you so much.